What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party. You know what we're doing here? We're up in America, the center, and good old-fashioned common sense. Happy birthday, Kid Copious. Yeah. Let's see some birthday wishes down in those comment sections. Let me know you guys are alive and breathing. Come on. Let's get with it and let's get going. So, you take opportunities when they're presented, and here's a great opportunity to explain how we need to act as a society. I like Charlie Kirk. I like the fact that he tries to stir up the conversation, get things going, confront people with their own ideas, and possibly change some minds. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's just an instigator. I don't know. But I like the guy. He's all right. But the headline read, Charlie Kirk smokes Trump over push to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. Quote, everything already smells like weed. Yeah, and it does. I got to give him that. I guess recently Trump had a $1 million a plate fundraiser, and one of those people that was there was Kim Rivers, the chief executive of Trulieve, one of the largest marijuana companies. And apparently she spoke to, well, I'm guessing it's a she, maybe it's a he. Kim can go both ways sometimes. But anyhow, she talked to Trump about reclassifying it. And it would reclassify marijuana as a Schedule 3 drug. Right now, it's like Schedule 1. It's with heroin and ecstasy, which is mind-blowingly stupid to begin with. But, doing that, reclassifying it federally, would allow tax breaks for marijuana companies, which are legitimate companies as of now. It's a thriving business. And it would also allow for additional medical research. And that's the part that's important. We need to find out what's going on. You hear a lot about CBD. I've heard mixed results myself. I don't know. I don't really see CBD as being effective. But maybe the dosage that I used was wrong. I don't know. That's what we need to know. Like, what amount of CBD should we be using? Does CBD work better in conjunction with THC? Blah, 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 blah. But, in response to Charlie Kirk's tweet, social media users pounced all over it and found a message that he had posted in 2018 that read, people should not go to prison for using, producing, or selling marijuana. Now, I disagree with that statement. Believe it or not, I do. Because producing marijuana can sometimes involve going into federally protected lands, contaminating water supplies, threatening local residents. If you're doing it illegally, I think you should be shit hammered. Here in California, we literally do nothing about people who illegally grow out in our forest. And again, that raises the risk of fires getting started. So, I think people should go to jail for producing marijuana illegally. I think it should be very, very stiff. Recently in this local area, we had a few people who were killed when hash oil production exploded. And it was being done in a home. I think production of marijuana can be dangerous. And the same thing with selling. I like the what we have here in California, where it's a regulated business, and there's certain ethics and procedures and requirements for doing that business. And I think, that should be propped up. But anyhow. California pushes partisan plan for new Democrat districts to counter Texas and fight for U.S. House. Newsom goes to L.A. to launch his campaign. Yeah, and we heard about that. ICE went out and started arresting people. It's turning into a little bit of a war. Newsom and other speakers veered from discussing the technical grist of reshaping districts known as redistricting, and instead depicted the looming battle as a conflict with all things Trump, tying it explicitly to the fate of American democracy. As Newsom said, we cannot stand back and watch this democracy disappear district by district all across the country. We are not bystanders in this world. We can shape the future. Yeah. Okay, so you're going to save democracy by destroying democracy. That sounds like your plan for the homeless. We're not going to solve the homeless problem. We're just going to allow it to fester. We're not going to do anything about the crimes and the problems that we have here in California. We're going to spend your money destroying democracy. But we're going to tell you that we're saving democracy. All right. And to make sure that we all get that point, they titled this move, because you have to go to the voters. I'm getting a little bit excited here. Hold on. So they want to frame this in a way that people will vote for it. So they call it the Election Rigging Response Act. So again, we're going to stop election rigging by rigging our own election. That's what they're doing. They're rigging an election. They're rigging an election in California. And now the big difference is that Texas has the right to do it. They just do. Their constitution allows for politicians to redistrict. I don't think that's a great idea, but the law's the law, right? California does not. Voters said that it's supposed to be an independent commission. So now he says he's putting in front of the voters to approve. No, he's forcing a vote. He's forcing people to vote on something. And of course, he thinks that all the Democrats in the state will do as he says. And that's not enough. He uses, of course, the threat to democracy as a dog whistle. But it's he and the Democrats who are the threat. Look at California. For years, they have violated the U.S. Constitution with illegal gun control, ammo purchases, magazine capacity, expandable batons have all been found in violation of the U.S. Constitution. And now he wants to tear up the California Constitution. They're not allowed to make maps. We voted for that. We said you're not allowed to make maps. They have made a map. They also, as part of the California Constitution, are not allowed to make maps based on political grounds, which they've done. They flat out admitted to it, that they are trying to get more Democrat seats. So here come the lawsuits. And that's going to cost more money. So they're not spending money on what we need. I mean, we had those horrific wildfires. Where's money for that? Okay, where's all the money for the homeless? Where's all the money for that? Where's the money for the people out there who are struggling to get by? People who are working multiple jobs and can barely afford any quality of life. No, you're going to spend it to get more Democrats in power. He's turning into the Democrat version of Donald Trump now. He's just acting exactly as they say Donald Trump does, as a tyrant. But they're much better at framing it, aren't they? So since this week's letter is why, I wanted to find something on the good old country of Yemen. And they actually did something good there. You know, Yemen is divided between many factions, and one of the factions that's striving for law and order made a bust on a ship. 75-ton weapon shipment from Iran to the Houthis, and it included chemical weapons. Right? Isn't that great? The Yemeni National Resistance, the main military faction fighting against the Houthis, seized 750 tons of weapons smuggled to the terror group by Iran. Yeah, that comes to us from Sky News Arabia. The operation revealed that both Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard and the Hezbollah were involved in weapon smuggling using shipping routes from Africa and Asia towards the Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen. According to the report, 4 out of the 7 smugglers came directly from Iran, participating in several operations that involve weapons and chemical materials. That's the part of our ongoing history right now that is the most alarming to me. An article like that should be big news. It proves what's going on over there. It proves who the real culprits are. We know it's Iran, but nobody wants to do anything about it? Really? We're going to sit here and spend money on the stupid shit that we're spending money on right now, when Iran is just literally, I don't understand it. I don't understand why we are not backing the people in Yemen to drive the Houthis out. I don't understand why we're not undermining Hezbollah. I do not understand why we are not more directly involved with ending Hamas. These are people who seek to randomly blow up portions of the world to get their point across. It's just ridiculous. It's happening in the Middle East. It's happening in Africa. And it's time that the Western world wake up to the fact that these enemies are not going to simply go away. We need to put them down. But, you know, I guess that's a discussion for another day. So another story that's been going on here is Trump's takeover of the Washington, D.C. police force. And it was interesting that somebody like Joe Scarborough, Morning Joe on MSNBC, came out and suggested that some liberal media figures were blasting Donald Trump, but not being entirely honest. Him himself even said that he found it interesting that some reporters critically covering the Trump takeover have privately expressed concerns about their own safety. That's the bottom line. Like, you got your party rhetoric and then you've got reality. And I think that's true on both sides of the fence. You know, you have the rhetoric that you have to claim you believe in, but then it's what you have to see. Like Scarborough said, you know, he's talking about a lifelong Democrat who are worried about their safety. They wouldn't go outside past 8 p.m. Their friends had been carjacked or shot at. I guarantee you that that's a person who's never been voted Republican in their life. This isn't imagined, Scarborough said. People you know that I know that they love, they and their friends don't feel safe in D.C. But they always want, now, you know, the liberal pundits, they all want to talk about how crime is down. But their murder rate is higher than New York, which has a lot more people than Washington, D.C. Right now, the D.C. Murder rate is something like 41 per 100,000 people. In Mexico City, 8 per 100,000 people. In Lagos, Nigeria, 15 per 100,000. Brasilia, of course, Brazil, 13 per 100,000. We have an alarmingly high homicide rate in our nation's capital. And going to the crime statistics, they also recently fired a top cop because he was falsifying records. And just like here in California, whenever there's a significant event, they send a sergeant or a lieutenant down to the scene who talks the officer out of writing things up as like armed robbery or something like that, and to change it to felony assault. Because felony assault doesn't show up on the crime stats. It doesn't show up in the FBI polling. And, like I've said before, it's not always the amount of crime, but the type of crime and even the location of the crime. It's one thing when drug dealers are robbing drug dealers or murdering other drug dealers. It's different when they're coming into the suburbs and murdering people who are not part of the drug trade or stealing from people who are not part of the drug trade. You know, that's what we saw here in California. When people were pulling up and snatching chains off of people's necks in the middle of the day at busy restaurants, or the takeovers of malls where gangs of people run in and just savage the whole place, and anybody who's caught up in it gets caught up in it. That's the big difference. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but in D.C., you know, this is happening to just random people in areas that were supposed to be safer. Now, of course, we can make the argument that, you know, we should make all places as safe as the suburbs or the nice suburbs. But without law enforcement's involvement, it's not something you can accomplish. And after all of that hemming and hawing by the media, DC has reached an agreement that they will remain in control of their police force, but they're going to have to stop being a sanctuary state or city. And, you know, that alone can really make a difference because we let in a lot of people under Biden. And if only a fraction of those people came here with criminal intent, that's still a lot of criminals who have recently arrived to our shore. Criminals who have no ties to the United States and will quickly flee. We already saw that a lot with some of these quarterbacks and some of these celebrities who got robbed. They were robbed by people who came up here on, you know, travel visas, committed a bunch of crimes, and then returned to their homeland to sell all the goods, thus insulating themselves from local law enforcement. You can't track down stolen goods in LA if they're being sold in frickin' Peru. That's just the way it is. So, Israel says it killed an Al Jazeera journalist, claiming he was a Hamas leader. This is an interesting story because it sort of shows you the level that Hamas will go to. So this guy, Sharif, you know, everybody's crying about it because Sharif was an Al Jazeera journalist. But in reality, he was in charge of like a little brigade or something like that was throwing rockets into Israel. And the documents that they found included personnel rosters, lists of terrorist training courses, phone directories, and salary documents for him that provided unequivocal proof that al-Sharia serves as a military terrorist in Hamas. So he's a journalist, but his side hustle is being a Hamas fighter. But this isn't known. This isn't being put out there widely. It's out there on some websites, but when I searched up the story, which is what I do, I look at who's covering it. And it was, a couple people up at the top, Reuters had a story on it, but mostly it fell to smaller papers or news agencies to cover it. Because the media right now wants to paint Israel as the bad guys. And this doesn't fit into the bad guys. This fits into the whole notion that terrorist organizations are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their goals. That's just it. That the average person over there, even a guy who's a reporter for Al Jazeera, has been radicalized and has no problem launching rockets into Israel. And again, that's the kind of truth that we need to know. I warned you. Yeah, this is a quote from a Republican candidate for the governor of Massachusetts. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey announced the closure of all remaining hotel shelters in the Bay State amid the formal termination of her executive emergency focused on the state's Biden-era migrant influx. We'll get to why Massachusetts. Meanwhile, Mike Kinley, her Republican rival in the gubernatorial race, is telling the Democrat, I told you so. It's unsustainable. That was the problem that was exposed quickly under the Biden era migrant influx. Yeah, right. It was Biden opening the border. Let's just call it what it was. The border was open. Anybody who tries to tell you that the border was closed is just freaking lying to you. They're just handing you the party Kool-Aid. Families were placed in hotels, sometimes for years. It doesn't make any sense. There was no plan to reform the shelter system, she says. So we took action. Right. Okay. And this all stems from 1983, Mike Dukakis. He signed what remains the nation's only statewide right to shelter law, which sent into motion the conditions for such a illegal immigrant housing crisis. So anyhow, Healey, the governor of Massachusetts, revised Dukakis' law, putting a 6-month limit on that right and to require proof of residency as well as proper immigration paperwork, with some exceptions. Look at that. This is the party that screams whenever you want voter ID about the rights of the people to not have to show ID to vote. But if you want her money, you're going to have to show. That's really funny. Her rival said she didn't listen. She sold false hope to migrants and taxpayers. So here's a little timeline of what happened and why it's ending. So she declared an emergency over the migrant crisis. They spent $830 million in just the first month of fiscal year 25. The projected $1 billion plus annual salary to cost to shelter 4,000 families, which works out to something like $3,400 per week per family. That's more than the monthly take-home for many full-time working citizens. Many working and middle-class Americans feel like they're paying taxes to fund a parallel welfare system for newcomers who didn't follow legal channels. We're struggling with inflation, rent, and stagnant wages, and we're watching billions go to people who in some cases aren't even authorized to work here. That's what the Democrats in Massachusetts created. And they do the same thing here in California. The lack of vetting combined with the long stays at taxpayer-funded housing makes this feel less like temporary emergency aid and more like institutionalized benefit migration. So why? Why did Massachusetts blow all of their money to keep migrants happy? Well, see, first you form a sanctuary state. You give illegal benefits, little gerrymandering, and you through like making sure they're in the right areas and things like that, and you get power. Because They count illegal aliens in the census. So you can end up getting more representation than citizens that you represent. Isn't that a clever little trick? But these sanctuary states and cities are flat out illegal. They're disobeying federal law. Now you would say, well, California violates federal law by making marijuana legal. Yes, but there's not much effect on society. It doesn't cost the state money for me to go and buy weed. It simply doesn't. The state makes money off of weed. They do. They blow the money, but they're making money. Look at the sales taxes. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 26%. So governments are making money off of weed, right? And in making marijuana legal does not protect the criminals. It protects citizens. We don't have to go to bad areas in town to find our weed anymore. Yeah. That's why there's a difference between my opinion on disobeying the federal orders on weed versus the federal orders on sanctuary. One protects the citizens and protects something that is, for the most part, harmless to society versus the blight of illegal immigration. Look, I'm sorry to say it that way, but it is a blight. A lot of the illegal immigrants who came during Biden's time did not come with any sort of safety net. They didn't have friends or family here who could help provide for them. These were people who came here in a lot of instances fleeing crime in their own country, criminal charges in their own country, and a lot of them came here just simply to get free shit. How is that good for our country? It's not. And now they're in a dogfight over this redistricting so they could keep fucking California as a sanctuary state. I don't want California as a sanctuary state. If an illegal alien gets busted for selling fentanyl, he needs to be deported. We don't need that here. If some guy's been arrested 60 times, when is California and other sanctuary states going to say enough is enough? I'll give the governor of Massachusetts some credit because she's finally reached the point where she had to say enough is enough, and she actually said enough is enough. But speaking of enough is enough, right now, okay, there is that woman, I think her name was Kim Fields or something, and she refused to give a gay couple a marriage license. And she was found to have violated their civil rights. She had a big judgment against her, several $100,000, and she's continuing the fight. Now, the Supreme Court is considering hearing her case. Now, my fear, and the fear of a lot of people out there, is that this might reopen looking at whether or not gay marriage is a federal issue or should it be left up to the states. Okay? I don't think they should muck with that at all. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that if the Supreme Court invalidates gay marriage, I'm done with the Republicans. Because that's just mean. And it's complicated. And it's going to fuck over people who do not deserve to be fucked over. Okay? It's one thing when you say we're no longer going to be a sanctuary state. We're no longer going to provide handouts to illegal aliens. Yes, those people will suffer, but those people weren't supposed to be here. You're talking about possibly taking away the rights of American citizens, and I just don't buy into that. All right? The good news is there's not much of a threat of that happening because this case that's being brought forward is about her right to not issue the license, not the license itself. So we'll see. You know, again, I'm a big believer that if you are really, you know, religiously inclined to not want to participate in any way in gay marriage, I believe you do have that right to say, I don't want to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. I don't want to perform a gay wedding. I don't want to perform at gay weddings. I don't want to give them a marriage license, have somebody else do it. You're wrong, but you should have the right to do that. You should have the right to do what makes you feel good. You know, just like outlawing abortion forces women to have babies, you know, we can't force people to go against their religious beliefs. We can't force it. Unless, like in the case of the Muslims, some of their so-called religious rights intercede with the rights of women. And at that point, I'm sorry, but your religious right has to go away. Okay? You don't have to believe that homosexuality is fine and God's okay with it and Jesus is cool with it. You don't have to believe that, but you can't act upon it in a violent way or in a discriminatory way. But when it comes to making a choice, and there are other options, such as a cake or clergy, or in this case, a woman issuing a license, maybe accommodate them a little bit. They're wrong, but if their religious belief really dictates that, I think we have to honor that. Now, another one of the whys I want to talk about is the youth. It's really easy to look at some of the riots and some of the shit that's gone on over the last couple years and see that, wow, it's a lot of young people. But it's not really their fault. It's more that they've been manipulated because they haven't seen the story over and over again. Think about like movies. When you get to my age, now moving mid-late 50s, I've seen a lot of movies. So there's a lot of plot lines, a lot of storylines that I've already seen before. We saw this. Like, let's take Iran. Like, we saw Iran take hostages back in Jimmy Carter's days. We saw them attack the British embassy. We saw them attack airplanes, take hostages, set off bombs in marketplaces. We've seen Muslim terrorists everywhere. We remember, we were alive. We were there. We were stunned as the buildings collapsed, as the towers collapsed on 9/11. So we see Hamas and terrorist organizations for what they are. They're not freedom fighters at all. We know this. We've seen it. It's the same thing with the climate change. First, it was all about global warming and how all the ice was going to melt and then we would flood. Then it was global cooling, and Al Gore came out and said that by 2000-something, the rivers and harbors of New York would be frozen shut. So now we're being asked to pay exorbitant prices for solar and wind. We're being forced into electric vehicles, and we already know this is all based on bullshit. But the kids don't have that experience. When it comes to trust or understanding of a subject, experience is the number one factor. So just remember that when you're dealing with people who are younger than you, they don't have the same experiences. They're going to react to the way I feel about climate change. They're going to react negatively because they haven't seen all of the lies that have come before it. They're hearing this stuff often for the first time. Just, same thing with Israel. I mean, I've seen what has gone on with Israel. I've seen Israel, behave badly, but I've also seen Israel attacked on multiple occasions. And I've seen the Jewish hate. And I've heard firsthand accounts of what it was like during World War II. So I have a different experience than people that are younger than me. And we can't alienate the youth. We can't sit there and pretend that we're better than them. We just have more experience. And at the end of the day, the most important why is you. As in you and I. We have the power to stop this shit. Think about this. If every person in America who was fed up with the red and the blue bullshit decided that we were going to go purple and we all settled on a third-party candidate, what could they do? And when they start manipulating like they're doing right now with the redistricting, we could fight back on that. The political groups, Republicans and Democrats, hate purple state. They fucking hate people like me. Because I am not wed to either one of those fucking letters. I'm telling you right now, if they outlaw gay marriage, the R's are never getting my vote again. Until a candidate comes along to undo that. And I am never voting for a D until I see them pull back from the left and come back to the middle and end sanctuary states. I'm never voting for a Democrat in California until the sanctuary state moniker is dropped from our fucking name. I'm not going to play their games. I'm not just going to simply vote for a Republican because he's a Republican. I'm not going to vote for a Democrat because he's a Democrat. If we all started doing that, we could make change. Because with all the people who I talk to across all spectrums, from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high, I talk to people. And I know one thing. Everybody is fucking purple. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party. And so are you. Spread the word. Keep on grinding. Love one another. And remember, man, sometimes to shake off all the bullshit, you just have to dance it out.